Here we go with the last lesson in Chapter 3, Lesson 3.8. In this lesson, we're going to learn how to divide decimals by decimals. Open your books to page 240. So reading the directions on the top of page 240, we're dividing by a decimal. That's the only thing new, is that we're going to have decimals as divisors, and we haven't had that before. And in order to divide by a decimal, we actually have to get rid of that decimal. We're going to change the divisor into a whole number. To do this, we're going to multiply both the divisor and the dividend by the same power of 10. So we're going to either multiply both the divisor and the dividend by 10, by 100, by 1,000, by however many we need to get rid of the decimal in the divisor in the outside number. And really, if we say we're going to multiply by 10 or by 100, all we're doing is swooping the decimal over, and we have to swoop over the same number of places in the divisor as we do the decimal. Here's what we mean. So in the first example, we're going to take 1 71/100 and divide by 9/10. So we write it out normal here. 1 71/100 divide by 9/10, but we can't divide by 9/10. We want to divide by the whole number 9. So we swoop that decimal over 1. We multiply by 10 and swoop it over 1. And if we multiply by 10 to this, we also have to multiply by 10 on the dividend, so that we're changing them equally, so that the answer will still be the same. Okay, so we're going to swoop over 1, and then here's the actual division problem we're going to do then. We're going to do 17 1/10 divide by the whole number 9. Okay, so then once we get to this part here, it's the same as what we did in lesson 7, where we got to move the decimal up, but otherwise we pretty much ignore it. And we go through our long division steps. We're going to divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. And just make sure the decimal points are lined up. Okay? We definitely can continue to estimate first, check with multiplication, but our division stays the same. The only thing new in lesson 8 is that we got to swoop over to get rid of the decimal in the divisor. Here's another example. Pick up your pencil and let's work through this one together. We're going to find 2 64/100 divide by 6/10. So this is what it starts off like. 2 64/100 divide by 6/10. We're going to estimate it first. So we're going to say, well, let's say that instead of 2 64/100, it's about 3. And we're going to divide by about 1. 3 divided by 1 is going to be somewhere around 3. Okay, that's our estimate. But what we need to do is first change that 0.6 or 6/10 into a whole number. We need to swoop over one place there. So we're going to multiply by 10. That's swooping over one place. So that means we also need to multiply the dividend, the inside number there. We're going to multiply that by 10 as well. We have to multiply them by the same thing. Swoop the same number of places. Okay, so now we moved over in both of them. The decimal point is now between the 6 and the 4. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead right away. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move my decimal place is now here. I'm going to move it up here in the answer. Kind of tiny there for me to write. Now we do long division and we say, let's see, 2. Does 2 divide by 6? Nope. 26. Does 26 divide by 6? It does. 6 times 4 is 24. So I'm going to put a 4 right there. 4 times 6, 24. Subtract. Bring down the 4. 24 again. 24 divided by 6 is 4. 4 times 6 is 24. Subtract. I get 0. I'm finished. My answer is 4.4. 2.64 divided by 0.6 is 4.4. So we could check to see with our estimate We got 4. It's a little bit bigger than 3, but it's a single digit number, so we know that we're on the right track. We've got 3 got it's for you to try on the bottom of page 240. They're definitely going to take some space, either in the work zone or get a separate piece of paper. It's going to be really, really important that you keep things lined up very carefully. So maybe try the graph paper, try lined paper turned sideways. Make sure you have plenty of room to work these out. I'm going to do letter A with you. So I'm starting with 54 and 4/10 divide by 1 and 7/10. So I'm going to rewrite it. 54 and 4/10 divide by 1 and 7/10. I can't divide by a decimal. I want to get rid of the decimal, so I'm going to multiply by 10, or I'm going to swoop over 1. Then I'm going to take this and swoop over 1, and then I'm going to move my decimal point over 1 space. So I'm going to go ahead and put the decimal up there at the top right away. Now I'm just doing regular long division. So I'm going to do, let's see, does 17 go into 5? No. Does 17 go into 54? Yes, it does, but I don't know how many. Lots of guess and check, same old long division stuff. Let's see what 17 times 2 is 34. I think I could go bigger than that. 17 times 3 is 51. That one works. So 3 times 17 is 51. Subtract, bring down. 34 divide by 17. Oh, I already worked that one out before. That's a 2. 2 times 17 is 34. Subtract. I got nothing left, nothing to bring down. My answer is 32, or 32.0. I want you to work through the next 2 problems on the Got It. Remember, it's the same old long division. You just have to do this swooping step. However many times you swoop in the divisor, you need to swoop in the dividend as well. So I'm already looking ahead here. This one's going to have 2 swoops in both numbers. This one's going to have 3 swoops in both numbers. Pause the video, work them out, and then restart and see how you did. Final answer for letter B is 23.4. 23 and 4/10. Go ahead and look through if you got a different answer. See if you can find where you don't quite match up with me. This last one's kind of a goofy one. There's lots of swooping over, and then there's lots of extra zeros and extra places, and your final answer is just 0.9. All right, the second page of examples, page 241, is more of the same. It says we might have zeros in the quotient and the dividend, which we've had before, but really what they're talking about is we might have to annex some zeros. We might have to add some zeros to the numbers because we can't swoop. If we have empty swoops as we're moving the decimal point over, we need to fill in the swoops, the empty swoops, with zeros. So here's the first example that they give us. 52 divide by 4/10. If we move over 1 space with the 4, there was no 0 here. We move over, there's an empty swoop. We got to fill in the 0 and then move the decimal place up here. That we've moved over, we've got an empty swoop. We fill it in with the 0. So that the problem that we actually are going to calculate is 520 divided by 4. So we added that 0 in. That's the only thing that's different here. But then we're still going to do divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. Divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. Remember, any number or any space in front of the decimal point has to have some answer, some part of the quotient. You have to fill in those spaces with the zeros if there are zeros. Here's another example. This one, we move over 2 places in the divisor. We move over 2 places in the dividend. There's going to be lots of extra zeros that we don't really need there. You can keep those zeros there, but remember to make sure you put the decimal point in the right place. We don't really need all those extra zeros. Looking at this last example, let's work this one out here. We're going to do 11.2 divide by 0.07. Since 0.07, there's 2 places we need to move over. We're going to multiply both by 100. So I'm going to swoop over 2 places. Swoop over 2 places. So that I'm actually going to be dividing 1,120, that's where my decimal point is, divide by just 7. And my first step is to make sure I put that decimal point up in the right place. Now I can just do some regular division. 1 does not divide by 7. 11, 7 goes into 11 one time. Multiply, subtract, bring down. 42 divided by 7 is 6. 6 times 7 is 42. Subtract. Ooh, I got 0. And I bring down, and I still have 0. Oh, I must be done. Except I have this empty space here. I got to make sure I fill in a 0. My answer isn't 16. My answer is 160. All right, there are 3 got it's at the bottom of the page, 241. Again, there's not very much room for you to work in your math book, so find some space, find some scratch paper, something to make sure that you're working all these out. We'll do the first one together. So we have 5.6 divided by 0.014. So I can't have a decimal in my divisor. I got to move it over 1, 2, 3 spaces. So I'm going to take this decimal and move this one over 1, 2, 3 spaces. And then I have these empty swoop marks. Empty swoops I got to fill in with zeros. And then I'm going to make sure my decimal's here. I'm going to put my decimal up on the answer line right away. Now I can do some regular division. 5 divided by 14 doesn't work. 56 divided by 14. Do some guess and check over here. I know it's going to be at least a few times. Let's see what 14 times 3 is. That's 42. Ooh, I think I can do one more. 14 times 4, 16, 4 is 56. So 56 divided by 14 is 4. 4 times 14 is 56. Subtract, bring down a 0. It doesn't work. 14 doesn't go into 0, but I have to put an answer up here. 0. 0 times 14, subtract, bring down another 0. 14 goes in again, 0. My answer is 400. Point nothing, 400.0. You try letter E and letter F. Pause the video, restart it, and see how you did. Letter E is kind of a tricky one because you had to annex and add extra zeros to keep going. There's no remainders here. We got to keep going until we can't go any further unless they tell us that we can round to a nearest place value. I kept adding more and more zeros until I ended up with the remainder of 0. But now when I look up here at my work at the top, this is a little trick I've shown lots of you that we just put a little X to know we can't do anything. But we can't have an X in the number, decimal point X312. So in my final answer, I need to go ahead and make this a 0. We could make this one a 0 as well and say that our final answer is 0.0312. For letter F, we had to do the same thing. I had to annex a couple of zeros because I couldn't do anything with that. 25 didn't go into 4. I needed to add a 0 and make it 40 first. Then I added another 0 so I could bring down another 0 and keep things moving along. And then I rewrote it, so instead of my little x's placeholders, it is 0 and 0.016, or we would say 16 thousandths. One more example just for you to look at here on the top of page 242, to know that of course we're not always gonna have just plain old division problems. We've got some information to look at in the table. How many times as many internet users are there in Japan than Spain? And it tells us to round our answer to the nearest tenth. So we have Japan 127.4 and Spain 40.4. So we're going to take Japan's number and divide by Spain's number. So we're finding out how many times would we multiply Spain to get Japan. So we do Japan divide by Spain. So over here they wrote that problem out, 127.4 divided by 40.4. They multiplied by 10, swooped over 1, so that they're doing division with this big number. 1,274 divided by 404. They had to just do a lot of guess and check. They annexed 2 zeros. It said to round to the nearest tenth. So they only, even though they don't have a remainder of 0 down here, they could stop at 2 place values because now they have enough information to be able to round up. This problem could keep going and going and going and going, but we don't need to if we're going to round to the nearest tenth. We only need to get at least to the hundredths place. So I can say, ooh, this 5 here is 5 tells me to round up, so I can change it from 3.15 to 3.2. There are about 3.2 times as many internet users in Japan than there are in Spain. So keep that in mind, that yep, you have to keep adding zeros. We can't have any remainders when we're using decimals. When we want to answer a division quotient with the decimal, there's no remainders. But we only need to go far enough so that we can round if they give us those directions of rounding to the nearest tenth. Last long division lesson for you, so good luck, work hard.